are these accounts of these human populations existing millions of years ago, human footprints and human artifacts, many millions of years old in some cases. We all observe that we're conscious. It's the most real fact of our existence. It doesn't require any faith or belief. Did not think that human beings existed at the time these footprints were made. They were found in layers of volcanic ash. Knowledge and awareness may be lost in human society. Well, that started when I was 16 years old. I was living in Europe at the time, and I went to Stockholm on one of my vacations. I was staying in a youth hostel, and I met some young people from Europe who had gone to India overland and come back. And I was fascinated by their stories of visiting India and Nepal and the Himalayan mountains and meeting different yogis and things like that. So I became interested in Indian philosophy, and whenever I would find a book about the Upanishads or the Rig Veda or Bhagavad Gita, I would read it, and I really got a lot out of it as a young person with a lot of questions about myself and the nature of the world I live in. So eventually that interest led me to become a disciple of a guru from India, Bhaktivedanta Swami. And I began to study more deeply the Puranas, the historical and cosmological writings of ancient India. And I was reading books from other traditions as well. And one common feature of them was that they described human populations existing on this planet for going back for far longer periods of time than the modern scientific theories allow. So I began to wonder, are these accounts of these human populations existing millions of years ago, are they simply mythological, or is there perhaps some physical evidence that would be consistent with that would support that? Now, when I looked into the current textbooks of archaeology, I didn't see any such evidence. I saw only the evidence that supports the now dominant theory that humans like us appeared fairly late on this planet within the past 200,000 or 300,000 years. And before that, we're told there were no human beings like us. So I decided to look beyond the textbooks. Somehow I had some suspicion that if I looked at the original scientific reports, there might be something else. And when I did that, I found there were many reports by archaeologists, geologists, other scientists digging into the earth of discoveries of human bones, human footprints, and human artifacts, many millions of years old in some cases. So I had to ask myself, well, why isn't that evidence, if it's there in the original scientific reports, why isn't it in the textbooks? And why is it being ignored, forgotten, in some cases actively suppressed? And I determined it was because of a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science, whereby evidence that conforms to the current dominant theories passes through this intellectual and social filter very easily. But evidence that radically contradicts the dominant theories is filtered out. So that evidence that's filtered out, I collected in the book called Forbidden Archaeology. Well, it's a very good question. If we're talking about footprints, for example, I'll give an example of a discovery of footprints. In 1979, Mary Leakey, who was a very prominent archaeologist, announced the discovery of footprints at a place called Laetoli in the country of Tanzania in East Africa. In her original report, published in National Geographic magazine, she stated that the footprints exactly were like modern human footprints. But she and her colleagues did not think that human beings existed at the time these footprints were made. They were found in layers of volcanic ash that were dated as being about 3,700,000 years old. So it was too old for modern humans, so they speculated these must have been made by some kind of hominin, some human ancestor like Australopithecus. That's the ape man or hominin that scientists think lived at that time. But we have discoveries of the foot structure of Australopithecus. Foot bones belonging to Australopithecus have been found at places like Sterkfontein in South Africa. And the foot of Australopithecus was not like that of a modern human being. For one thing, the first toe, the big toe, moved out to the side like a human thumb. And the toes were longer than human toes. Actually, the only creature known to science that has a foot structure exactly like that of a human being like us is a human being like us. So I would say the footprints that Mary Leakey found could have been made by humans like us. Now you could say, well, maybe someday we'll find the foot structure whereby things evolve slowly, gradually over time. I think they've edited the fossil record to conform to that gradual, linear process of development. But I think if you actually look at all the evidence, what emerges is a picture of coexistence rather than evolution. Even today on this planet, human beings coexist with various species of apes and monkeys, and they also coexist if you accept the evidence for Bigfoot and Sasquatch and the Yeti of the Himalayas. They also coexist with ape men, living examples of hominids that are not totally human in their anatomy. So as today, human beings are coexisting with apes and monkeys and ape men-like creatures like Bigfoot, then in the past, the evidence shows they were also coexisting with them as far back in time as you want to go. Well, the claim is, yes, that there appear to be transitional fossils, but if you put the anomalies back into the picture, what you see is evolution is not supported by the evidence. They're not transitional fossils because what they consider to be the end product of that transition existed alongside the supposed ancestors and even before them in some cases. Like one of the architects of the current theory of human evolution read my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and he wrote to me later, if this evidence is to be taken at face value, it would completely contradict the Darwinian theory of evolution because it puts humans like us before even the first primitive apes and monkeys, which are supposed to be at the beginning of the transitional fossils that lead up to human beings. There was a kind of evolution that takes place, and this depends on, understanding this depends on seeing that a body, whether it's a human body or an animal body or an ape-man body, is a vehicle for a conscious self, a soul, if you want to use a religious term, but I prefer conscious self. Because when people hear a word like soul, they think, well, that's religion, and it requires faith and belief, and I'm not into that. I'm just into science and observing things. Well, we all observe that we're conscious. It's the most real fact of our existence. It doesn't require any faith or belief. And as conscious beings, we experience ourselves as selves, literally. I'm a self, I have my consciousness, you're a self, you have your consciousness. We may agree or disagree because we're individual conscious personalities. So if we understand that a body is a vehicle for a soul, then we can understand that when the physical body is finished at the time of death, the soul continues to exist, the conscious self continues to exist, and therefore it goes into another body, which may be human or not. So there is a kind of evolution that takes place, but it's an evolution of the soul, an evolution of the conscious self, and not an evolution where one physical body turns into another. Just like in the course of a lifetime, you might own several different vehicles. You know, it's not that one vehicle turns into another. The vehicles are individually manufactured, but you, maybe because of income or whatever, will get a different type of vehicle. You'll move through the different types of vehicles. So I think there is an evolution of the soul that can move from an ape body to an Australopithecus body up to a human body. It's not that the bodies are evolving, but the soul is evolving through the different forms. If you ask me my opinion, it's no. There aren't transitional fossils. It's important to understand that a living entity, according to the Vedic picture of things, is made of three things. A body, a gross physical body made of the chemical elements like calcium, phosphorus, iron, carbon, oxygen, all of that. Then there's a subtle mental body made of a more subtle material energy that really can't be perceived by our ordinary senses. Just like there's air. You can't see air, but when air moves over a denser element like water, you can see its effect. Waves form on the surface. So mind is something like that. It's material, but it's subtle, beyond the range of the modern scientific techniques. But we can observe its effect on ordinary matter, causing things that we can't explain by our current laws of physics, like psychokinesis or remote viewing, things of that sort. Those are activities of this subtle mind element. And then beyond that, there is the conscious self, the Atma, or soul. And according to the condition of the mental body, a gross physical body appropriate for that state of the mental body develops. So there is something that stays with the soul that changes in the Darwinian fashion, that's directly transitional. That is the mental body. As long as the soul is in contact with that mental body, it gets different kinds of gross physical bodies. So that's what determines the path of evolution for each individual conscious self. When I say evolution, I mean evolution through different kinds of gross physical bodies. Is it possible that this whole narrative that we find taught in the school system today, that some first single-celled creature has gradually evolved to form all the other different kinds of plant and animal bodies that we observe around us? If your question is that false, possibly false, I would say yes, it is possibly false, because, first of all, no one has shown exactly how chemicals interacting in the Earth's early oceans could have formed even the most simple type of organism, single-celled organism. That is one of the unsolved problems in biology. And then, assuming that you have some first single-celled creature, how did they start grouping together to form multicellular creatures? That is not explained. We're told it happened, but how it happened, no scientist can say. And then, how does that first, even you grant some first single-celled organisms clumping together to form a multicellular organism, then how do you go from that to the huge variety of body plans that we observe in the world around us? Look at all the varieties of plants, tall palm trees, little blades of grass, radiolaria, like sand dollars, starfish. It's one of the unsolved problems in biology, the origin of distinct body plans for the different types of creatures that we see in the world around us. It's asserted, well, it happened by evolution, but if you study the current literature very carefully, or you search on the web for unsolved problems in biology, you'll see this is listed as one that remains unsolved. So yeah, there's a possibility that that narrative, that this all happens in some linear type of fashion like that, may not be the case. Well, before we ask about the origin of living things, we should understand what a living thing is. Many scientists today will say, well, they're arrangements of molecules. And that's part of what we are. But if we look at ourselves, for example, we'll see that yes, the gross physical body made of the chemical elements is part of what we are in this present condition. But then there is also apparently a subtle mental body composed of subtle mental and intellectual faculties, and also ego, false ego, I would say. And then beyond that, there's the actual conscious self, which is the real identity of the living entity. It's the conscious self that is actually alive. All the other elements, the mind and the gross physical body made of the chemical elements, are made of matter. It's like a machine, a very complicated machine, but it's a machine that is a vehicle for that conscious self. Why are there different varieties? I would say, from the standpoint of the Vedic cosmology, conscious selves in the world of matter have different desires. So there are different types of material bodies, gross and subtle, that are designed to give a certain type of experience, a certain type of sensory experience to each kind of desire. So there's a whole array of different types of gross physical bodies that are designed to give those experiences. Because ultimately, I believe we're in a consciousness-based universe. Just like a publisher may understand that the audience has different types of desires. So there are romance novels, there are young adult novels, there's fantasy, science fiction. There are different categories of books or films for people to enjoy, because the producer understands there are these different types of desires and provides a range of publications to satisfy them. So I think on the level of the conscious universe, it's there to give conscious selves different types of experiences, and those are provided by bodies, which are, you could say, not really even created because they're always there. According to the Vedic cosmology, the whole universe goes through vast cycles of manifestation and not manifested, manifested and not manifested. During the non-manifest states of the universe, and I shouldn't even say the universe, because there are actually an uncounted number, you can say millions and millions, or an infinite number of universes that are undergoing those cycles. And the different types of, and then within those universes are the conscious selves. In the non-manifested state of the universe, they're in a state of suspended animation. But when the next period of manifestation of the universes comes, the same types of bodies that they were in previous to the destruction of the universe, or the non-manifestation of it, they get the same kinds of bodies they were in when the last cycle stopped. So in that sense, there isn't any creation. These forms are eternally existing. So I'm not a creationist, really.
Right.
If we look at the cyclical nature of time, the last creation cycle or manifestation cycle began a couple of billion years ago. So we also have to consider that given the consciousness-based nature of reality and that there is a conscious individual source of everything, there is a purpose for the universe. This is important to understand from my point of view. If the universe really does have a purpose, and the purpose of it is to be an educational experience for a conscious self that is now under the influence of the material energy and is taking one material form after another, if the purpose is that that conscious self should come to a state of awareness where it's no longer limited in that way, but attains a state beyond birth and death on some higher level of reality, if that's the purpose, and that purpose is best achieved in the human form of life, then I would say it's not surprising that the human form has been around for a long time. I would say it would go right back to the beginning of, it's just like if we make a space station, if a country makes a space station, it doesn't put it out into space just hoping that someday some creature capable of making use of it will appear inside of it. They make it because they have astronauts and they want them up there, and when the space station is there, immediately it's inhabited by a person capable of making use of the purpose for which it was made. So I would say, are you in a consciousness-based cosmology, which I favor rather than a matter-based cosmology, purpose can be there, and if the purpose is to raise consciousness to the level where it's no longer in the cycle of manifestation and non-manifestation, and that is achieved in the human form of life, it should always have been available. Because if it weren't, I mean, I think that would be denying conscious selves an opportunity to achieve their real purpose. And I don't think an intelligent, conscious source would do that. Periodic catastrophes do occur, and they do sometimes result in knowledge being lost. Therefore, there's some system, some universal system that comes into play when that knowledge is lost in human society. In Bhagavad Gita, it's stated by Krishna, who is regarded as the source, said Janmadyasya Yataha, that there is a supreme conscious source of everything that exists. In the Bhagavad Gita, that conscious individual personal source of everything says, if this yoga, if this knowledge of life's real purpose is lost, I will restore it. So that does happen from time to time, because the tendency in this level of reality, there's kind of an entropy that goes on, that things tend to deteriorate. But then there's renewal. just like the system of yugas. It starts out with a golden age where everyone is very conscious and aware and living simply and naturally and harmoniously, and it's very easy to transcend when conditions are like that. But then the conditions in the next stage grow a little more difficult, and in the next stage, even more difficult. And in the fourth age, the age of Kali, in which we are now situated, things become very difficult, and knowledge and awareness may be lost in human society. But because ultimately there is that conscious self who desires that the individual conscious personal selves in this world achieve their full potential. And in my free time, some friends of mine and I, we go out to the Hekla volcano in Iceland because we heard there was an eruption at Hekla, which Jules Verne wrote about in his book, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Because in medieval times, Hekla was considered to be the gateway to hell. So we went to this, there's no roads that go out there. I was in Reykjavik with my friend, and we rented a Land Rover, and we drove across black sand deserts and glacial streams, get to where the eruption was taking place. And what was happening was there was a flow of lava coming out a crevice on the slopes of Hekla. Hekla is kind of a big volcano. And this river of lava was flowing across the black sand desert. And when you see things like that happening, when you see nature like that, you realize things are not very stable. So sometimes I'm asked, what are my favorite cases of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity? And one of them is the California gold mine discoveries. These were made in the 19th century in the gold mining region of California, in the Sierra Nevada mountains at places like Table Mountain in Tuolumne County. And miners came there during the gold rush days in the mid-19th century, and they were digging tunnels into the sides of mountains, and they found in them human bones and human artifacts. So these came to the attention of Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. He got his degree in geology from Harvard University. And he went out into the mountains and did his own investigations and collected many of the artifacts that had been discovered. He carefully interviewed the people who had made the discoveries, and as I said, did research of his own. And he, as a professional geologist, determined that these were genuine discoveries, and they were found in layers of rock that modern geologists consider to be of Eocene antiquity. That means the Eocene is a geological period that goes back to about 50 million years ago. And he reported these discoveries to the scientific world in a book that was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. But we don't hear very much about these discoveries today because of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. These discoveries came to the attention of a contemporary of Whitney's, Dr. William Holmes, who was an anthropologist working at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And Holmes said, or wrote in a report, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he would not have published that report, despite the imposing array of testimony with which he was confronted. In other words, if the evidence didn't fit the theory, it couldn't be taken as true. Whitney should have known that, and he should not have made that report. So the discoveries went into obscurity, and they are still present in the Museum of Anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley, but they're not displayed to the public. They're kept in a storage building a few miles from the museum. But I got permission from the directors of the museum to study and photograph them. And I did see them. It took quite a bit of negotiation to be able to do that, but I have seen them. And I've also relocated some of the 19th century gold mining tunnels where these objects were originally found. And it should be possible to do more research there. I like this case because it's very well documented. The artifacts can be seen in the museum, so they really do exist. And the process of knowledge filtration is also very well documented. So it's a good case of what I call forbidden archaeology. In these gold mines, they found obsidian spear points, which is really kind of significant because obsidian is a very brittle volcanic glass type of stone. And it's good in the sense that it's very sharp. The flakes of it are very sharp. And if you make a spear point out of obsidian, it works really well. But the problem is that obsidian is very brittle and it's very difficult to work. It requires someone with a great deal of skill and ability, human ability and skill and intelligence to work obsidian and get really good spear points or other types of implements. They also found many stone mortars and pestles of various sizes. And the mortar and pestle is the type of object that archaeologists attribute only to human beings like us, not to any type of hominid ancestor like Australopithecus or Homo erectus. They also found human skeletal remains of the anatomically modern type. So these are the kinds of things that Whitney was reporting and documenting, and which are still in the collections of museums in California.